Uh, Sorry for keep showing up. It's wonderful to have all of you here. Welcome for this event. Actually, I'm just here to introduce the keynote speaker for this evening. And we really have outdone ourselves yet again. Our speaker this evening is former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, who is currently the chair of the Albright Stonebridge Group, which is a global strategy firm. And she's chair of the Albright Capital Management as well. In 1997, she was named the first female Secretary of the State and became, at the time, the highest ranking woman in the history of the US government. From 1993 to 1997, she also served as US Permanent Representative to the United Nations and as a member of the President's Cabinet. She is a professor in the practice of diplomacy at the Georgetown School of Foreign Service. On May 29th, last year, President Obama awarded the US Medal of Freedom to Dr. Albright, the nation's highest civilian honor to her. So please join me in welcoming Secretary Albright.
Good evening and greetings to everybody, and I'm delighted to be here, and I want to thank Dr. Hom and the Institute for inviting me. It is truly an honor to be part of a forum celebrating the 60th anniversary of the alliance between the United States and the Republic of Korea. I have to say, in watching that video, it reminded me where I was in June 1950 when the war broke out. We had just come to the United States in 1948 from Czechoslovakia, and my father, who had been at the United Nations and had left because communism had taken over Czechoslovakia, said to me, "You always have to remember who your friends and enemies are, and we have to fight communism." And so I grew up with that story. And so watching those pictures again and understanding the basis of our alliance meant a great deal to me. And I have to point out that my father went to teach at the University of Denver, where the Graduate School of International Studies was named after him, and Chris Hill is now the dean. So we are very connected. And I would like to thank Senator Lieberman for voting for me for confirmation. Senator Mint was not there yet. Since 1953, there have been many twists and turns in the relationship between our two countries, but throughout, our underlying friendship has been unshatterable. This enduring alliance has been a blessing to people on both sides of the Pacific, while promoting prosperity and advancing the cause of peace in East Asia and across the globe. I hope and believe that it will continue for decades, even centuries to come. During my 4 years as America's Secretary of State, I had the pleasure of visiting South Korea many times. And although I no longer represent the United States, I can say with confidence that America's commitment to the Republic of Korea's security remains beyond question. 2 months ago, Secretary of State John Kerry was in Seoul to reiterate that message, and during his own visit last year, President Obama reinforced it. I'm sure that I speak for most Americans, and especially those who have troublesome neighbors, when I say that we admire South Korea's steadiness, patience, and courage. In the past 60 years, there have been many moments of crisis when tensions on the peninsula increased and the possibility of war loomed. To cite one example, in the early 1990s, North Korea withdrew from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and announced its plan to build nuclear weapons. At that time, I was America's ambassador to the United Nations and had to sit through a particularly vituperative and offensive speech from the representative from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It was just before my birthday, and I was trying to figure out what to say without getting involved in the ugliness of the discussion. And I said I would like to thank the representative of North Korea for making me feel 40 years younger before my birthday by that disgusting speech from the Cold War. Since then, 2 more decades have elapsed, but the rhetoric from Pyongyang is still the same, and the nuclear threat has become a good deal worse. As many of you know, I am one of the few American diplomats, and here I exclude Dennis Rodman, who have negotiated directly with North Korea's leaders. And I have promised never to play basketball if he promises not to go back. This was in October 2000, and my immediate purpose was to obtain a halt in the North's provocative missile programs. I was privileged to have conversations with President Kim Dae-jung before I went in order to get a little bit of a better sense of what I was getting into. And President Kim Dae-jung described to me what it was like to deal with Kim Jong-il. I had in mind a much larger goal than just dealing with the missile programs. It was to persuade Kim Jong-il to end his country's isolation and move toward a more normal relationship with the world. I met with him for many hours, and we disagreed on almost everything, but I was encouraged that he at least seemed aware of the need for change. He spoke respectfully of South Korea, and he actually said that it would be possible for us to keep our troops there. He expressed a desire for better relations with the United States, and because communism had been exposed as a failure, he was also plainly searching for a new economic model. It took me a while at the dinner that we had together for me to understand when he said I need a new Swedish model, what he really was talking about. However, despite having the powers of a dictator, he was afraid to run the risks that openness and reform might entail. So instead of pursuing a new economic strategy, he settled for a few small experiments. And instead of addressing the world's concerns on the nuclear issue, he backed away from his commitments and continued to play the role of victim, insisting that his country was being treated unfairly. To date, his son seems inclined to offer roughly the same combination of self-pity and bluster with similarly destructive results. It took years of effort and goodwill to build the Kaesong Industrial Park, but only a few months of bullying and bad faith from Kim Jong-un to shut it down. In the past, the North was willing to discuss the goal of a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. Now its number one demand is to be recognized as a nuclear power, which is patently unacceptable. So the question arises, where do we go from here? We know that in recent weeks, the North has expressed renewed interest in talking to the United States and to the South. This reflects a change in tactics, but that is something we have seen many times before. Under the circumstances, our leaders should pursue a diplomatic strategy that emphasizes cooperation not so much with North Korea as towards North Korea. We need the highest degree of coordination among policymakers in Seoul, Washington, Tokyo, and to the extent possible, Beijing. We must speak with one voice, reminding North Korea that it still has an opportunity to choose compromise over confrontation and real dialogue over repeated threats. It still has a chance to renounce nuclear weapons and thereby move away from a security policy based on fear to a strategy grounded in law. If it does make the choice, the potential rewards are many. If it does not, the DPRK will remain in the prison it has built for itself, and the gap will continue to grow between the North's weakness and the South's prosperity and prestige. For here is the great contrast. 60 years ago, North Korea was in better shape than it is today, while the South was devastated by conflict, dependent on foreign help, with a population among the poorest in the world. But because of the Republic of Korea's commitment to innovation, discipline, and productivity, we have witnessed in recent decades what many call the miracle on the River Han. Today, South Korea boasts one of the globe's largest and fastest growing economies. It's a leader in exports, per capita income, and technological prowess, and it is the first country to have graduated in status from recipient to donor of overseas aid. The Republic of Korea has also built a robust and competitive democracy for which its voters should be congratulated, and not only because they've done what certain others have failed to do, but it has also elected a woman president. Finally, I have to mention that South Korea's soccer or football team has just qualified for the World Cup. But whether measured economically, politically, or athletically, the country's rise is mirrored by the enhanced nature of its international standing. 3 years ago, the Republic of Korea played host to a meeting of the G20 heads of state. 2 years ago, Ban Ki-moon was unanimously reelected as Secretary General of the United Nations. Last year, Seoul was the site of the second Nuclear Security Summit. And earlier in 2013, South Korea began a 2-year term on the United Nations Security Council. Meanwhile, a long overdue free trade agreement between Korea and the United States has gone into effect. There can be no question that the Republic of Korea has moved to its rightful place on the center stage of world affairs, and that the United States welcomes this development. Historically, we know that the United States and Korea have viewed certain events differently, but we also know that our alliance has helped both countries to become stronger and to live in freedom and peace. Looking ahead, it is vital that our cooperation continue on matters of security, diplomacy, and prosperity. The United States should never become an obstacle to reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula, but neither should America ever abandon its ally. In turn, I am confident that South Korea will do its part by further strengthening its democracy and by upholding global norms. Meanwhile, both countries must and will remain resolute in dealing with the North. Neither threats nor empty promises can force us apart. Since 1953, and especially in the past 20 years, East Asia has become a driving force in the world economy, but it is also a place where tensions between individual countries persist. Even though bitter memories from the past have not yet been fully erased, the region is rushing headlong into the future. This creates a climate of risk and an urgent need for sources of stability. It is essential, therefore, that ties between the United States and Korea remain firm so that future challenges, both foreseen and unforeseen, can be met. So in closing, let me say that because of everything that is going on in the world, I'm often asked whether I'm an optimist or a pessimist. My reply is that I'm an optimist who worries a lot. I worry for all the obvious reasons, but I'm an optimist because I truly believe that free people working together can achieve whatever they set out to accomplish, even in the most trying of circumstances. I also have faith in democracy and an abiding trust in the ideals that have sustained the alliance between the Republic of Korea and the United States of America for the past 60 years, the same ideals that have brought us together tonight. Over the years, our alliance has been tested many times and has never ruptured. We know it will be tested again, but have no doubt as we turn to face the future that it will grow in strength and purpose for generations to come. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.